efficient in the context of the cultural challenges that she raised. And I think with your permission, I'd like to just take a moment to take that opportunity to ask myself questions about my relationship with Peter Mandelson. Did I consciously ignore the stories that followed Peter Mandelson? Indeed, know about many of them from many, many years ago. I don't think that I did. Did I ever ignore warnings that were put to me about Peter Mandelson? I didn't receive any to do so. But as I reflect on my honourable friend's speech, it made me think, did I, at best, subconsciously treat Peter Mandelson differently because I believed him to have influence and power within the Labour Party? And I think the answer to that question is yes, I did. Have I benefited from that relationship in the time I've been an elected politician? I think in part the answer to that question is yes, I did. And for that I'd like to apologise to the House, to the victims, to Lisa, and commit to then doing something about it. And in the first instance, can I say that I hear my honourable friend's request for a meeting with the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. I know that there is a request with number 10 for the Prime Minister to do so, but if she thinks it's appropriate, I make myself available for that meeting to discuss the issues that she has raised.
A Cabinet Minister just told Parliament 3 things that will be on the parliamentary record permanently. First, that he subconsciously treated Peter Mandelson differently because he believed Mandelson had influence and power within the Labour Party. Second, that he benefited from that relationship in the time he has been an elected politician. Third, that he apologises to the House, to the victims, to Lisa. These are not allegations made by the opposition. These are not claims made by journalists. These are statements made voluntarily by the minister responsible for defending the government's position at the dispatch box in Parliament. They are now part of the permanent parliamentary record.
Again, what a decent man he is, and he is doing a very difficult job in defence of somebody who knew a lot more than he did. He was not Chief of Staff at the time that the Mandelson appointment was being carried out. And on page 8 of the first bundle, we have the note from the private secretary to the Prime Minister, which says, we have sought a due diligence review, and your Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney at the time, has discussed Peter's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, which we will go through with you, but your Director of Communications is satisfied with his responses to questions about contact. Yet we also know from earlier in the bundle that the Prime Minister specifically knew that Mandelson had stayed in Epstein's flat while Epstein was in jail for abuse of an underage girl. So the Prime Minister knew all that at the time. And then, what is the purpose of having a box at the end of this marked for the Prime Minister's comments on the alternatives he's being given, when, in fact, as we now know, clearly explained by the Paymaster General, there has been no redaction, the Prime Minister did not comment. Why did the Prime Minister withhold any remarks on this highly contentious matter, and where did he comment, and where did he give his decision? Because he certainly didn't do it in the place that he was supposed to do it.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In relation to the first part of the Right Honourable Gentleman's question, he knows, because I've confirmed at the dispatch box to the House previously, that questions were put by the Prime Minister's former Chief of Staff to Peter Mandelson following the due diligence report to ask for further information about the stories that had been reported in the newspaper, and that Peter Mandelson replied to those questions. That information was then considered by those in number 10. As I've confirmed to the House, that document, the questions and its answers, are one of the documents that have been held by the Metropolitan Police, and I have been advised repeatedly that I am not permitted to disclose what I have seen in that document on the floor of the House. And so I'm afraid it's just going to have to be one of those questions that remains until such time as the Metropolitan Police publishes its documentation. In relation to the second part of his question,
Darren Jones just confirmed something else. He has had WhatsApp exchanges with Peter Mandelson. He confirmed this himself on Monday. Those messages are not in the parliamentary release. His explanation, he has not saved them on his devices. He then said, The only person who could release those messages would be Peter Mandelson, who has refused to disclose his phone. So we have a government minister confirming he has had WhatsApp exchanges with the man at the centre of this investigation, exchanges that fall within the scope of what Parliament voted to see, and those messages do not exist in recoverable form. Parliament voted on the 4th of February to see all of this. This is what it received instead.
As I said on Monday, Madam Deputy Speaker, some messages may not have been captured where people may have previously changed their phones without having backed up messages or had disappearing messages turned on, and I noted to the House on Monday that included myself. So in my circumstance, to answer the questions from the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, it's not that I took a unilateral decision about messages that I felt were in scope or not in scope of the humble address. It's merely I have access to no messages to disclose. And that's an important distinction because the disclosure process that took place involved the Cabinet Office writing to every department in government, to Permanent Secretary and Principal Private Secretary level for all relevant ministers and special advisors and officials, to set out the guidance on which the disclosure process should take place. That is, for example, to include WhatsApp and other communication services, emails, personal devices, work devices, other messaging platforms, and a clear set of guidance about what would be in scope and not in scope. Permanent secretaries, as the accounting officers to Parliament for each of those departments, were individually made liable for ensuring that disclosure process took place in line with the guidance. The Cabinet Office did not go to each person in each department and conduct that themselves. They executed it through departments in line with the process that I have set out.
Sure. I just want to make sure that I understand. I hope you'll forgive me if I don't. So in his case, was it his permanent secretary as the accounting officer who verified that the messages he had were not admissible to the process?
His misunderstanding, Madam Deputy Speaker, is there were no messages to consider, and that was different. Very briefly, but I should make progress.
So the reason I brought this up in the first place, because on Monday he said, I do recall having some limited exchanges with Peter Mandelson over WhatsApp, including those I've discussed in the media. So I don't wish to push this point too far, but I just wish to understand there were messages. Who decided that they were not to be submitted to the humble address? Please, can you explain?
I've tried to explain the answer to that a number of times, Madam Deputy Speaker. There was no decision to disregard any messages because there are no messages to consider. What I confirmed on Monday was that I have had WhatsApp exchanges with Peter Mandelson, but I haven't saved them on my devices to be able to share with my principal private secretary. The only person who could release those messages if they had them would be Peter Mandelson, who has refused to disclose his phone to the process.
Buried in the closing section of Darren Jones's speech today was something that has received very little attention. He confirmed that the government is ordering, and I am quoting directly from today's parliamentary record, an examination of any security concerns raised during Peter Mandelson's tenure as ambassador. Peter Mandelson was ambassador to Washington from December 2024 to September 2025. The government is now examining whether security concerns arose during that period. This is not a routine review. You do not order an examination of security concerns unless you have reason to believe security concerns exist. The government has not explained what those concerns are. Parliament has not been told. That examination is now underway.
Which documents the Metropolitan Police have, and so I can't speak to them in a particular fashion, but I share the sentiment of the Right Honourable Gentleman's point. The Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster asked me to confirm that there was a leak inquiry underway in relation to what appears to be information from UKSV being in the hands of Guardian journalists. I can confirm that leak inquiry is underway, but is not yet concluded. Questions were put to me in relation to questions of judgment and due diligence. I've already answered the point about the follow-up questions to the due diligence report, and can only reiterate the words of the Prime Minister to the Liberal Democrat spokesperson that he regrets the appointment and has apologised for it. The Deputy Chair of the Intelligence and Security Committee made what I thought was a very helpful contribution around thinking about codifying the precedent on which the government relies when making redactions in the future, and I can commit to taking that away and taking advice, not least in respect of what that might mean in terms of House business and government business, but I will do so. And my honourable friend, the member for Putney, I thought made some interesting points around how humble addresses may be used in the future, given that the House seems to have decided to want to use them more often than has been the case in the past. I was then asked by my honourable friend, the member for Liverpool West Derby, to confirm the government's continued commitment to the duty of candour legislation, which I can confirm. There have been, as he will know, discussions with families and others about refining some of the final points in that legislation. And the Honourable Lady for Aberdeen North asked me about freedom of information requests. I commit to taking that away and asking officials to try to respond as promptly as possible. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister has set out previously that there are clearly significant lessons to be learned from the issues that arose from Peter Mandelson's appointment. So whilst the Government considers that it has now duly discharged its obligations in respect of the humble address, it will nonetheless continue work on a number of important areas, including our commitment to bring forward legislation to ensure that peerages can be removed from disgraced peers, noting that Peter Mandelson has already been removed from the list of Privy Councillors. Changing the process for direct ministerial appointments so that due diligence and national security vetting must take place prior to announcement.
I was expecting and hoping that he would come on to Morgan McSweeney's messages, which was asked by the opposition front bench, and be really clear about where those messages are and if they exist. If they are in the category of things that are with the Metropolitan Police, for example, can he commit to going to the police and asking if he can tell us that those messages exist?
I say politely to the Honourable Lady, I've already answered all of those questions. The Government will continue its review with Sir Adrian Fulford to look at recommendations on the lessons of the national security vetting system from the Peter Mandelson case. We're ordering an examination of any security concerns raised during Peter Mandelson's tenure as ambassador, which the Government Security Group in the Cabinet Office is now taking forward. We're commissioning an independent review of how non-corporate communications channels are used in government, including WhatsApp. And in addition, the Cabinet Secretary has written to all heads of department to clarify the rules on record keeping and ensure they're being properly applied across government. The Government has also noted the Intelligence and Security Committee's comments on the management of sensitive information, concerns with which I share and have expressed that concern at the dispatch box. And the Government's committed to raising information security standards and will take further action on this issue.
So here is what the government's own minister said in Parliament today about the Mandelson files. He treated Mandelson differently because of his power within the Labour Party. He benefited from that relationship. He apologises to the victims. His WhatsApp messages with Mandelson are gone. The government is examining security concerns from Mandelson's entire time as ambassador. These were not allegations made by the opposition. These were statements made by the minister closing for the government. At the dispatch box, in Parliament, on the record. This is the public record. New analysis every week, what Parliament says, and what the numbers actually show. Subscribe if you want the full picture.